You are at Lake Rant, where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one is for Kuiper, who says he had a multiple choice, but I decided to pick number 2. He says, I'd like you to pick another series besides No Game No Life that you think typifies the otaku hero's journey, as you've coined it, and break down how it fits the story archetype, or does interesting things with the formula, or is in some other way significant in shaping your understanding of this story archetype. So I've talked about it a bit in my Steins Gate video, in the Log Horizon series, and now as I talk about Dr. Stone. This idea of the otaku hero's journey, which is basically the central tenets of it, so to speak, are that the otaku hero is somebody who's trying to save everyone. They're trying to reshape the world in such a way that no one has to die, that it will be a perfect world for everybody at the end. And this can happen on like a micro or macrocosmic scale. So like in the case of No Game No Life, this whole world is generated around the idea that it is possible to form a unified world where everybody's happy, nobody wants to kill each other, you know? And in that case, they literally have a system where you can't kill people. In Dr. Stone, his goal is to resurrect all of humanity. Nobody has to die, and he's going to make it better than it was before, you know? Fucking Steins Gate is like a micro example of this, where the goal is to make it so nobody dies in just this group. Like, however many times you have to run through this thing over and over again. Higurashi, another example of a story that's like this. It's less of an otaku hero's journey type of story, but because it doesn't really have the protagonist characters, but it also has that theme of like, let's keep redoing it until we make it without anyone having to die. And I just think that is it's very much like it's one part otaku hero and one part like a scientist kind of mentality. It's like, how can we keep running experiments until we find the one where where again nobody has to die. And so basically just achieving a perfect world, achieving a world of peace, but through the means of typically being an outsider character who basically envisions a structure of the world that would make sense, and has to try to bring it about. So, like, in the case of No Game No Life, the two main characters talk about in the beginning how, like, basically if the world made sense, like if it operated on logic, they could solve all the world's problems because you just have to basically slot all the pieces into place. But the world doesn't operate on logic. It operates on emotions and all this other weird shit that they don't know how to navigate. And so they get sent to a world that operates purely on logic, and now they can, in fact, solve the world. And they basically know how to do it as soon as they get there. We're just watching them go through with it, you know? In a case like Steins Gate, it's more that the character has an idea of what how they think things are going to go, and what they think, basically what they think would be a solution. However, they don't have the right idea about it. It's like they've tapped into something, but they don't have the words to describe it. And so they sound insane. And so that's why I've dubbed this character the Mad Scientist. So the two characters that make up the duology of the otaku hero are the Mad Scientist and the Living Computer. I had this idea because of the insane manic episode I went on a year ago, in which I believed that the two halves of the brain were separate entities, essentially, because there is one part of your brain that does your thinking, essentially, and another part that does your explaining. So the part that isn't the language center, you could even say all the parts of your brain that aren't the language center of the brain, are not capable of speaking directly. The language center is interpreting what it sees in those parts of the brain, putting that into words, and then saying it. So the language center is the part that I would describe as the mad scientist, because that person has seen something in their brain, in what the patterns they've recognized, but they don't have the words to justify it. So, but they believe in it. So they come off as insane because they're trying to explain something that they believe to be true, but they don't know how to explain it logically. The living computer is the part that is just collecting all the information and interpreting it, but doesn't necessarily know how to communicate the information, much in the way that a computer, has all this data, doesn't know what any of it means because it's just a computer. It's not, it's not there to make decisions about its data. So the perfect example of this is Shiro and Sora, even though I would say that in their case, both of them have a lot of the other facet too. Like, Sora himself is practically a living computer in that he can take a ton of information and interpret it. He's just not as good as Shiro at that element. And Shiro is able to make some pretty crazy decisions, but she's not as confident as Sora is. And so Sora, even if he doesn't have 100% of the data, is able to make an assumption about what the rest of the data is and to act on that. Whereas Shiro, as a living computer, if there's any data he needs filled in, or he needs like the back end work, the calculations to be done, he can run that through her because she's basically a calculator. So that is the two components. So another show, like Dr. Stone is not quite at an Otaku hero's journey story yet because of the fact that everything's embodied in Senku, and I would say he's more mad scientist than living computer because he does have to learn everything by himself. He doesn't just know all this shit, and even if he can run calculations pretty quickly and all that kind of stuff, he is not just a data bank. He's somebody who thinks he knows the answer, but he has to test hypotheses and slowly work his way through it. If he had a living computer, you almost wouldn't have a story. So it might be better that he doesn't, in the case of Dr. Stone, because he could just ask that person for, the optimal thing to be doing at any given moment and just do that. But he's not quite at that level. So I don't know, maybe a character like that would get introduced in the series. It would be interesting to see. I don't know because I haven't read the manga. But, in the case of Steins Gate, you have Okabe, obviously, is the mad scientist. Makise Kurisu is the living computer. And so another important aspect of a lot of living computer characters is they can't believe in something without seeing the science. They cannot believe in it until they have justified it. So the mad scientist, he has seen something he can't, he believes in something he can't justify. The living computer only believes in things that they have justified, even if they know that what the mad scientist is saying is plausible or that they should maybe listen. They are stuck. They are stuck because they cannot move past the lack of data. And this is a perfect, typified in those two characters, where Okabe, he's always willing to charge forward, but he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Kurisu always knows what she's talking about, not willing to charge forward on a theory until it's been proven. The two of them have to butt heads in order to get to a point where, they're seeing things the same way. So, what's another good example of this? There's elements of Otaku Hero's journey in Log Horizon, but it's... Oh, that's right. It was because Shiroe is basically a living computer character who's trying to be more of a mad scientist, and his mad scientist is the girl with the big tits, whose name I don't remember, who is off Kaname? Is that her name? The one who's on the journey from China. And she is, again, she's a character who's very brash, she's forthright, she just makes decisions quickly, and she knows how to manage people, and she's charismatic. Shiroe, he just knows all the data, all the answers, and he's always hesitating. In the early episodes, the biggest thing he beats himself up on is that he hesitates too much. But because of the fact that so many people have faith in his calculations and the decisions he makes, he is able to, sort of unlock more of that confidence by thinking about the mad scientists that he's been around in his life. So, you know, those are the ones that I've talked about already. I also think there is some application to like Gurren Lagann, which is kind of about striking a balance between these things. Kamina is obviously a mad scientist who has no, computer element at all. And Shimon early on is his living computer, and that's kind of what he looks to Shimon to be. He wants him to be like the guy who's going to ground all this stuff that he's trying to do, but Shimon's just not ready for it. So when Kamina dies, he's kind of left to now become the mad scientist, and he needs a living computer. And like he kind of gets that in Rosyu, but Rosyu doesn't have a. They're not connected enough. They're not working together. So there's that. It's like the two halves are butting heads before they can be unified, and everybody can kind of work towards the same goal. But yeah, there's just shades of that all over the place. I mean, if you find character combinations like this and stories like this, then that's basically what I'm talking about. Again, it mostly arose out of this period when I was thinking about that two halves of the brain idea and just comparing characters, like trying to figure out what side is more dominant in characters. Are they more logical or are they more, emotional? And the funny fact that it's really they're acting like they're opposite halves in a way. It's like the character who can't understand the emotional part of their brain is the one who acts emotionally, and the character who can't understand the or who has a stronger understanding of the things that they're seeing is more hesitant to put them into words. And so it's like each one is kind of dealing with that duality. That's all I have to say about that for now.